In the bustling city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the year 1885, the Industrial Revolution had transformed the landscape into a maze of smoking chimneys and thundering machinery. Among the most powerful men in this new world was Jonathan Whitmore, a railroad tycoon whose empire stretched across 3 states. His sprawling mansion overlooked the Allegheny River, where barges carried coal and steel that fueled his growing fortune. At 52 years old, Whitmore had built his wealth through shrewd business decisions and an eye for potential that others missed. He owned 4 textile factories, each struggling to maintain profitability in an increasingly competitive market. These factories employed hundreds of workers, mostly women who operated the spinning wheels and looms that produced cotton and wool fabrics for the growing American market. The idea came to him during a heated board meeting with his investors. They demanded answers about the declining profits, threatening to withdraw their support unless he found a solution. That evening, as he sat in his oak-panelled study, surrounded by maps of railroad routes and factory locations, Whitmore conceived an unusual plan. He would select 4 women, each from different walks of life, and give them temporary control of 1 factory each. These women would receive ornate brass keys, symbolic of their authority, and 1 month to prove their worth. The experiment would test his theory that fresh perspectives, unburdened by traditional business thinking, might breathe new life into his struggling enterprises. The first woman he chose was Margaret Caldwell, the wife of a prominent banker. She had organized several successful charity events and demonstrated remarkable organizational skills. The second was Sarah O'Brien, a seamstress who had worked in his factories for 15 years and understood the daily operations better than most supervisors. The third was Elizabeth Harper, a schoolteacher known for her innovative methods and ability to manage limited resources effectively. The fourth choice surprised everyone, including Whitmore himself. Mary Sullivan was a 28-year-old Irish immigrant who worked as a maid in his household. She had arrived in America 5 years earlier with nothing but determination and had quietly observed the workings of wealth and business from her position in the shadows. Unlike the others, she had no formal education or social connections, yet something about her quiet intelligence had caught his attention. The announcement of his unconventional experiment sent shockwaves through Pittsburgh's business community. Newspaper reporters gathered outside his mansion, eager to document what many considered either brilliant innovation or complete madness. The local Women's Temperance Society praised the opportunity given to women, while traditional businessmen shook their heads in disbelief. On a crisp October morning, Whitmore summoned the 4 women to his library. The room smelled of leather-bound books and pipe tobacco, its walls lined with portraits of successful industrialists. Each woman received an identical brass key, polished to a golden shine, along with detailed financial records of their assigned factory. They would have complete authority to make operational decisions, hire and fire workers, negotiate contracts, and implement any changes they deemed necessary. Margaret accepted her key with the confidence of someone accustomed to leadership roles. Sarah clutched hers nervously, aware of the enormous responsibility placed upon her shoulders. Elizabeth examined the financial documents with the analytical mind of an educator. Mary simply held her key quietly, her green eyes reflecting a depth of thought that Whitmore found intriguing. The terms were simple, yet challenging. Each woman would receive a modest salary during the month-long trial, but their success would be measured purely by their factory's performance. Increased production, improved worker satisfaction, reduced costs, or innovative solutions would all be considered in the final evaluation. The winner would receive a permanent position as factory manager with a substantial salary, while the others would return to their previous lives with a generous payment for their efforts. As the 4 women left his mansion that morning, each carrying their key and their hopes, Whitmore felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. He had built his empire on calculated risks, but this experiment ventured into uncharted territory. The industrial age had created unprecedented opportunities, yet it had also revealed the limitations of traditional thinking. The factories awaited their new leadership, each presenting unique challenges that would test not only business acumen, but also the ability to navigate the complex social dynamics of industrial America. Workers accustomed to male supervision would now answer to women, a radical departure from established norms that would require careful handling. Mary Sullivan walked slowly back to the servants' quarters, her calloused hands tracing the smooth surface of the brass key. She had spent years watching, listening, and learning from her position in the background. Now, for the first time in her life, she held the power to prove that worth was not determined by birthright or social standing, but by determination and vision. The following Monday morning brought the unprecedented sight of 4 women arriving at their respective factories, each clutching their brass keys with varying degrees of confidence. Word had spread quickly through Pittsburgh's industrial district, and curious workers gathered at factory gates to witness this unusual experiment unfold. Margaret Caldwell arrived at the Riverside Cotton Mill in a horse-drawn carriage, her burgundy silk dress and matching hat, announcing her social status to everyone present. The factory foreman, Thomas Mitchell, a gruff man with 30 years of experience, greeted her with barely concealed skepticism. As Margaret toured the facility, she immediately noticed the poor lighting and inadequate ventilation that made working conditions unnecessarily harsh. Her first decision reflected her charitable background. She ordered the installation of additional oil lamps and the opening of previously sealed windows, despite Mitchell's protests about heating costs. Margaret believed that improved working conditions would naturally lead to increased productivity, a philosophy she had applied successfully to her charity organizations. Meanwhile, Sarah O'Brien entered the Northside wool factory with the familiarity of someone who had spent 15 years navigating its corridors. The workers recognized her immediately, and their initial surprise gave way to cautious optimism. Sarah understood their daily struggles intimately, having operated the same machines and faced the same quotas that now seemed impossible to meet with aging equipment. Her approach differed dramatically from Margaret's. Sarah spent her first day not in the supervisor's office, but on the factory floor, working alongside the women she now managed. She identified bottlenecks in the production process that had been overlooked by previous male supervisors, who rarely ventured beyond their administrative duties. Her most significant early decision was reorganizing the workflow to minimize the time workers spent waiting for materials, a simple change that immediately improved efficiency. Elizabeth Harper approached the Eastside textile factory with the methodical precision of an experienced educator. She spent hours studying production records, worker schedules, and quality reports, treating the factory like a complex mathematical problem that required systematic analysis. Her teaching background had taught her the importance of understanding individual capabilities and motivations. Elizabeth's innovation came in the form of a skills assessment program. She discovered that many workers possessed talents and knowledge that were being underutilized in their current positions. By reassigning workers based on their strengths rather than arbitrary placements, she began to see immediate improvements in both quality and morale. Her factory became the first to implement a basic training program, where experienced workers taught specialized techniques to newcomers. Mary Sullivan's arrival at the Southside manufacturing plant created the greatest stir. As a domestic servant, she was the least expected of the 4 women to receive such responsibility. The factory workers, mostly immigrant women like herself, watched with a mixture of curiosity and solidarity as she unlocked the main office for the first time. Unlike the others, Mary spent her first 3 days simply observing. She watched the rhythm of production, noted where workers struggled, and listened to conversations during meal breaks. Her approach was informed by years of watching wealthy households operate efficiently with limited waste and maximum coordination. Her first major decision shocked everyone, including Whitmore when he received the report. Mary had noticed that the factory was purchasing expensive raw materials from distant suppliers, while similar quality materials were available locally at lower prices. She also observed that the current production schedule created periods of intense activity followed by idle time, leading to inefficient use of both workers and machinery. Mary implemented what she called the household schedule, treating the factory like a well-run domestic operation. She negotiated contracts with local suppliers, reducing material costs by 20%. She redistributed work hours to eliminate the boom and bust cycle, creating steady employment that workers appreciated and that maintained consistent output. By the end of the first week, preliminary reports reached Whitmore's desk. Margaret's factory showed improved worker satisfaction, but slightly decreased productivity due to the time spent implementing physical improvements. Sarah's facility demonstrated increased efficiency in existing processes, but maintained previous output levels. Elizabeth's factory showed promising signs of quality improvement and worker development, though production numbers remained steady. Mary's factory, however, presented numbers that made Whitmore review the reports twice. Not only had she maintained production levels, but her cost reductions had improved the factory's profit margin more than any of the others. Her unconventional methods had achieved in 1 week what traditional management had failed to accomplish in months. The business community began to take notice. Factory owners from neighboring cities sent representatives to observe the experiment, while local newspapers published daily updates on the progress of the 4 women. The novelty had evolved into a serious case study of alternative management approaches during a time when American industry was rapidly evolving. As the second week approached, each woman faced new challenges. The initial enthusiasm from some workers began to wane as the reality of sustained change set in. Traditional suppliers questioned the authority of female managers, and competing factories attempted to poach workers with promises of return to familiar male supervision. The true test of their leadership abilities was just beginning, and Mary Sullivan, despite her lack of formal business education, had quietly positioned herself as the most intriguing participant in Whitmore's unprecedented experiment. The second week brought unexpected challenges as competing factories attempted to disrupt Whitmore's experiment. Several rival industrialists, threatened by the possibility that women might prove more capable managers than men, began offering higher wages to lure away key workers from the 4 test factories. Margaret Caldwell responded to these challenges with the social grace that had made her successful in charity work. She organized evening meetings with workers' families, explaining the long-term benefits of the improvements she was implementing. Her factory now boasted the best working conditions in the district, with proper lighting and ventilation that had already reduced workplace accidents by half. However, her focus on worker welfare had not yet translated into the increased profits that Whitmore needed to see. Sarah O'Brien faced a different problem. Her intimate knowledge of factory operations had allowed her to identify numerous inefficiencies, but implementing changes proved more difficult than she had anticipated. Some of her former colleagues resented taking orders from someone who had recently been their equal, while others expected favoritism based on old friendships. Sarah found herself walking a delicate balance between maintaining authority and preserving relationships. Elizabeth Harper's educational approach was showing promising results. Her skills assessment program had revealed hidden talents among the workers, and her training initiatives were beginning to improve overall quality. The Eastside Textile Factory was producing fewer defective items, which reduced waste and increased customer satisfaction. However, these improvements required time to generate significant financial returns. Mary Sullivan, meanwhile, had been quietly implementing a plan that would soon astonish everyone involved in the experiment. During her years as a maid in Whitmore's household, she had overheard countless conversations about business deals, investment opportunities, and market trends. While serving tea during board meetings, she had absorbed information about supply chains, customer demands, and emerging technologies. Her most audacious decision came during the 3rd week of the experiment. Using the modest budget allocated for factory improvements, Mary had identified a struggling local inventor named Patrick Murphy, an Irish immigrant like herself, who had developed an innovative spinning mechanism that could increase thread production by 30%. The device had been rejected by established manufacturers who considered it too risky to implement. Mary visited Murphy's small workshop in the evenings after her factory duties. She examined his invention with the practical eye of someone who understood both the theoretical possibilities and the real-world applications. The mechanism was indeed revolutionary, but Murphy lacked the capital to produce it commercially and the connections to bring it to market. In a move that shocked the entire Pittsburgh business community, Mary used her factory's improvement budget to purchase Murphy's invention outright. She then worked with him to modify the existing machinery in her factory to accommodate the new spinning mechanism. The installation required temporarily shutting down production for 3 days, a decision that her supervisors reported to Whitmore with grave concern. During those 3 days, while the other factories continued normal operations, Mary trained her workers on the new equipment. She had carefully selected the most skilled and adaptable employees, offering them slightly higher wages in exchange for learning to operate the innovative machinery. The training sessions took place during evening hours, with Mary providing meals for the workers and their families, creating a sense of community around the technological advancement. When the Southside manufacturing plant resumed operations, The results were immediately apparent. The modified machinery was producing thread at an unprecedented rate while maintaining superior quality. Mary's factory was now capable of fulfilling orders that would have taken weeks to complete under the old system. Word of the innovation spread quickly through Pittsburgh's industrial network. Textile manufacturers from as far away as Philadelphia began placing orders specifically with Mary's factory, attracted by both the superior product and competitive prices that the increased efficiency allowed. Within days, the Southside plant was operating at full capacity with a waiting list of customers. Whitmore received daily reports of the dramatic transformation, but he insisted on seeing the results personally. When he arrived at the factory on a Thursday morning, he found Mary coordinating production with the calm efficiency of a seasoned manager. The workers moved with purpose and confidence, operating the new machinery with an expertise that belied their recent training. The financial impact was undeniable. Mary's factory was now generating more profit in a week than it had in the previous month under traditional management. The investment in Murphy's invention had already paid for itself, and projections suggested it would continue generating substantial returns for years to come. But Mary's innovation extended beyond the technical improvement. She had also established a profit-sharing program with her workers, giving them a direct stake in the factory's success. This unprecedented move had virtually eliminated the threat of workers leaving for competing offers, as they now earned more through their shared investment in the factory's prosperity than they could anywhere else. The other three women watched these developments with a mixture of admiration and concern. Margaret, Sarah, and Elizabeth had implemented solid improvements within conventional business frameworks, but Mary had fundamentally transformed the nature of manufacturing itself. Her background as a domestic servant had given her a unique perspective on efficiency and resource management that traditional business education had not provided to the others. As the experiment entered its final week, the entire industrial community was watching to see whether Mary's unprecedented success could be sustained or whether it represented a fortunate but unrepeatable circumstance. As the fourth and final week of Whitmore's experiment began, the entire city of Pittsburgh was buzzing with anticipation. Newspapers from New York, Chicago, and Boston had sent reporters to document what many were calling the most significant business experiment of the industrial age. The implications extended far beyond 4 factories, touching on fundamental questions about leadership, innovation, and the changing role of women in American society. Margaret Caldwell's Riverside Cotton Mill had become a model of worker welfare. The improvements she had implemented created the safest and most comfortable working environment in the district. Worker satisfaction was at an all-time high, and the factory had experienced 0 accidents during her tenure. However, the financial returns remained modest, as the costs of her improvements had offset much of the productivity gains. Margaret faced a crucial decision during this final week. Several prominent social reformers had approached her about using her factory as a showcase for labor rights, offering to help fund her initiatives in exchange for publicity for their causes. While the offer was tempting, Margaret understood that Whitmore's primary concern was profitability, not social reform. Sarah O'Brien's Northside wool factory had achieved steady improvements through her deep understanding of manufacturing processes. She had eliminated most operational inefficiencies and had successfully mediated several worker disputes that might have led to costly strikes. Her factory was producing more goods with fewer resources, demonstrating the value of experienced practical management. Sarah's challenge came from an unexpected source. A delegation of male supervisors from other factories visited her facility, ostensibly to observe her methods, but actually to undermine her authority. They questioned her decisions in front of workers and suggested that her improvements were merely temporary fixes that would fail under pressure. Sarah had to draw upon all her experience and diplomacy to maintain control while demonstrating that her methods were both sustainable and superior. Elizabeth, Harper's Eastside textile factory had become a center of innovation in worker development. Her training programs were producing measurably higher quality goods, and several of her workers had developed new techniques that improved both efficiency and product quality. Customer complaints had virtually disappeared, and the factory was building a reputation for excellence that commanded premium prices. Elizabeth faced the challenge of scaling her educational approach. Other factory owners were offering substantial sums for her trained workers, recognizing their enhanced value. She had to implement retention strategies while proving that her investment in human capital would generate long-term returns that justified the higher labor costs. Mary Sullivan's transformation of the South Side manufacturing plant had attracted attention from industrialists across the nation. Orders were pouring in faster than the factory could fulfill them, despite the increased production capacity from Murphy's spinning mechanism. The profit margins were exceeding all projections, and the factory had become the most profitable unit in Whitmore's entire empire. However, Mary's success had also created unexpected complications. Several established manufacturers were attempting to steal or replicate Murphy's invention, leading to patent disputes and legal challenges. Competing factories were spreading rumors that Mary's operation was somehow illegitimate or that her financial reports were exaggerated. More significantly, Mary's profit-sharing program had sparked interest from workers at other factories throughout Pittsburgh. Labor organizers were using her model to demand similar arrangements elsewhere, creating tension between factory owners and their employees. Some industrialists blamed Mary for inciting worker unrest across the entire region. The most serious challenge came when a consortium of traditional manufacturers made Whitmore a substantial offer to purchase Mary's factory, specifically to shut down the operation and prevent the spread of her innovative practices. They argued that her methods threatened the stability of the entire industrial system by creating unrealistic expectations among workers. Whitmore found himself in an impossible position. Mary's factory was generating more profit than his other 3 facilities combined, but the political and social pressure from his peers was intensifying. The Pittsburgh Industrial Association had called an emergency meeting to address what they termed the Sullivan situation, and several longtime business partners had threatened to end their relationships if he continued to support what they saw as dangerous precedents. During this tumultuous final week, Mary made another decision that would define the experiment's ultimate outcome. Rather than simply defending her position, she proposed expanding the innovations to Whitmore's other factories. She offered to train supervisors in her methods and to help implement modified versions of Murphy's spinning mechanism across the entire operation. Her proposal included detailed financial projections showing how the expansion would multiply the profits she had generated at a single facility. She also addressed the social concerns by suggesting gradual implementation that would allow workers and management to adapt to the changes without disrupting the broader industrial community. The proposal demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of both business, strategy, and political realities that surprised even Whitmore. Mary had evolved from a domestic servant with practical insights into a visionary leader capable of managing complex organizational and social challenges. As the final day of the experiment approached, Whitmore prepared to announce his decision. The 4 women had each proven their capabilities in different ways, but the contrast between their approaches and results was stark. The choice he made would not only determine the future of his factories, but would also send a message about the direction of American industry in the rapidly changing industrial age. The entire business community waited to see whether innovation and unconventional thinking would triumph over traditional methods and social expectations. On a crisp November morning in 1885, Jonathan Whitmore stood before a packed auditorium at the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, preparing to announce the results of his unprecedented experiment. The room held the city's most influential industrialists, reporters from major newspapers, and representatives of the 4 women who had transformed his understanding of business leadership. The month-long trial had exceeded his wildest expectations, but not in ways he had anticipated. Each woman had approached the challenge differently, revealing aspects of management and innovation that traditional business education had overlooked. The results demanded careful consideration of what success truly meant in the rapidly evolving industrial landscape. Whitmore began his announcement by reviewing each woman's achievements. Margaret Caldwell had created the safest, most humane working environment in Pittsburgh's industrial district. Her Riverside cotton mill had eliminated workplace accidents entirely and achieved unprecedented worker satisfaction. While her factory's profits had increased modestly, the long-term value of her approach was evident in reduced turnover, improved morale, and enhanced reputation. Sarah O'Brien had demonstrated the power of practical experience combined with compassionate leadership. Her Northside wool factory had achieved steady productivity gains through operational improvements that could be sustained indefinitely. More importantly, she had proven that promoting from within could be more effective than hiring external management. a lesson that challenged conventional hiring practices. Elizabeth Harper had revolutionized worker development through her educational approach. Her East Side textile factory was producing the highest quality goods in the region, commanding premium prices that more than offset the costs of her training programs. Several major retailers had begun placing exclusive orders with her facility, recognizing the superior value of well-trained workers. Then, Whitmore turned to Mary Sullivan's remarkable transformation of the Southside manufacturing plant. Her factory had not only exceeded all profit projections but had fundamentally changed the nature of textile manufacturing through technological innovation and worker partnership. The financial results were undeniable, but the broader implications were even more significant. Mary's integration of Murphy's spinning mechanism had increased production efficiency by 40% while improving product quality. Her profit-sharing program had created a workforce more dedicated and productive than any in the region. Most remarkably, her systematic approach to innovation had identified opportunities that traditional management had completely overlooked. The audience listened in stunned silence as Whitmore revealed the final numbers. Mary's factory had generated more profit in 1 month than the previous year's total for all 4 facilities combined. Her cost reductions, efficiency improvements, and premium pricing had created a business model that other manufacturers were desperately trying to replicate. However, Whitmore's decision surprised everyone present. Rather than simply appointing Mary as the winner, he announced that all 4 women would receive permanent positions managing their respective factories. Each had demonstrated unique strengths that addressed different aspects of successful business operation, and the combination of their approaches would create a more robust and innovative company. Margaret would lead the new worker welfare division, implementing safety and satisfaction programs across all facilities. Sarah would become operations director, applying her practical expertise to streamline processes throughout the company. Elizabeth would head the training and development department, expanding her educational programs to create the most skilled workforce in the industry. Mary would assume the position of Chief Innovation Officer, with authority to identify and implement technological improvements across the entire operation. Additionally, she would partner with Patrick Murphy to establish a research and development division focused on manufacturing innovations.